Hello and welcome to Inflection Point Conversations. I'm Michelle Obeda, an art director and 3D artist. In this podcast series, I'll be interviewing experts in the fields of art, architecture, and visualization. Together, we'll take a deep dive into the disruptive topics that have reached an inflection point in our industry. If you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment to like, rate, and subscribe. You can also comment and give feedback. I'd love to reach more people and grow this amazing community. Today I'm talking with Natasha Wozniak. Natasha spent 2 decades working in the world of metal sculpture and fine jewelry before transitioning into 3D animation. She began by learning 3D modeling and then expanded to materials, lighting, animation, and rendering. She also delved into the world of 2D animation and learnt how to blend the mediums seamlessly. Natasha's extensive training and experience in marketing and business has helped to bridge the gap between business strategy and content creation. As a freelancer in the industry, she's had the privilege of working on projects for high-profile clients, including Shakira, Google, and Demarini. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So, we met when you did a presentation at 3DNY,
Yeah,
which was awesome. And I feel like a few of us keep talking about your presentation actually because it's opened up the world of, when you're not a freelancer, you're sometimes not aware of all the work that freelancers do and the breadth of it, which is kind of amazing. And the fact that you taught yourself after having a career in something completely different. I love that and I like admire it so much. Um, and yeah, like I'm gonna link to anyone who is either just listening or hasn't seen your work before, but your animations are very captivating and I feel like they reach a lot of people, which is amazing.
thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start from the beginning. So you had a career working in jewelry and metal sculpture for 20 years. How did you get into that?
Uh, I actually started when I was in high school.
Mm.
So I grew up in Wisconsin, and at that time, there were quite a lot of art classes, variety of art classes that you could take even at my high school. I grew up in a town actually that has a museum also devoted to craft. The company Johnson's Wax is based there, and
Mm.
they actually have funded exhibitions about craft, and then kind of as a it's not anything really like specifically tied to the Johnson family, but there's a Wisdom Museum in my
Mm.
hometown that often has shows about crafts. So I think I was exposed to it early. My parents brought me to um, a lot of art exhibitions. I went to an elementary school that was called Fine Arts Elementary School, so we got
Oh,
to,
that's
have our
cool.
hands on a lot of art projects and stuff. I would do a book report and I could do a diorama and my mom would have to tell me to go to bed already and stop working on it. So, um, metals, I don't know specifically. I've had a hard time pinpointing it, but some point, just playing around in my dad had a little like work area in the basement and playing around in
Mm.
there, I just got drawn to it. So my very first jewelry was actually taking solder, for
Oh,
pipes and using the
yeah.
soldering iron and making little pendants out of it.
Oh, wow, that's cool. And so what kind of jewelry did you make? Like rings, necklaces, earrings, everything?
Yeah, I started my jewelry business in my mid 20s. And by
Mm.
that time I actually, my first job was in a custom jewelry store in my hometown. And then I went to school at UW-Madison and studied art, but I spent most of my time in the metalsmithing studio. And I also worked for a couple of people here in New York. I worked in a jewelry production studio.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that's cool. So you had exposure to all of I guess, all of the equipment from the beginning before you had to start your own business.
yeah, yeah. So I was already there was a point in time where I was mostly I there was a school called the Craft Students League, that was
Mm.
at the YWC on like 53rd and Lexington, which doesn't exist anymore. But I found my way there after I moved to New York City, and I became the studio assistant, and then I started teaching classes there. So they had this holiday sale, uh, and it was actually that was the year that September 11th happened, and I was
Oh,
unemployed after September 11th because just everything was, in disarray in New
yeah.
York City. So, to say the least. So, I thought, okay, I got to keep myself occupied, especially at that time. It was extremely stressful. So,
Mm.
being in New York, so I made this little collection of jewelry and ended up putting it on the table at the Craft Students League holiday sale. I sold some stuff there. Like, I started selling it to my friends. And yeah, I didn't really have a super specific plan of, okay, I'm going to start a business. It happened
Mm-hmm.
kind of organically.
Oh, that's
But
cool. People started like saying, "Oh,
yeah,
where'd you get that? Do you
yeah,
sell that?" Yeah.
yeah,
That's cool. I have friends who make jewelry who I feel like enough people say to them, "I'd love one of yours. You should sell them. I'd definitely buy them off you to sort of encourage them." But I wonder if there's this big gap between, "Oh yeah, I can make some for my friends," versus, "Can I turn this into a business I want to do?"
yeah, definitely. I mean, if somebody is doing it on the side and they
Mm,
just want to sell it to their friends, I think, go for it. But I would say that starting a full-fledged jewelry business is very, very challenging.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And did you have, I mean, I know that you said that you worked in some other studios. Did you have an experience with actually starting your own business, or did you have to learn all of that from them yourself?
I had to learn all of that.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting.
So starting out, you know, researching, where do you sell it? How do you price it?
Mm,
Um, I had to learn all about marketing. I mean,
yeah.
I sometimes wish that I were still, me of that time, or I still had the kind of confidence because
Yeah.
I used to send I made this little catalog, and it just had a very small collection of jewelry in it. And I just sent it to all kinds of stores. Later on, I would realize, oh, those stores were never going to pick me up like that early in my career. But I just had this level of confidence that sometimes I
Yeah.
wish I had back, like being in your 20s and being like, I'm making something amazing. Everyone should have it. Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. I feel like a lot of people can relate. I can definitely relate. I started a clothes business, which I never actually did anything about, and I never did it. But I thought, yeah, I make my own clothes. It was like out of like recycled fabric of other things, and I thought this is great. And I sort of really inquired to people until I realized I had, zero idea of how to actually make that work. And
Yeah.
um but like yeah, I know what you mean. You have the confidence when you're really young to be like, I could do that. Why not? Um, so you mentioned that your work was exhibited in places like the V&A and the Philadelphia Museum of Art and you were published in a book called 500 Rings. So was that some point throughout your jewelry business? Like how long had you had your business at that point?
Think actually, I was published in a few books. I
Mm.
don't remember exactly which one was first. There was this whole series of like 500 rings, 500 earrings, and stuff. But that was about 4 or 5 years after I started. I
Mm,
started
yeah.
making some one of a kind pieces,
Oh,
and so
okay.
that was the kind of thing that was getting featured in those books. And actually, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, that is a craft show that they host every year. And that was actually at the end of when I was in jewelry making. I
Mm,
think that might have
yeah.
been one of the last ones I exhibited at.
Yeah, amazing. And what kind of exposure do you think has been the best for your business?
Honestly, I think um, one of the biggest things that happened was being on this HGTV show called
Oh,
Crafters
okay.
Coast to Coast. And it was they had a kind of, I realized that reality TV or this kind of content, they actually script a lot of it. So they wanted
Yeah.
me to say all of these really kind of goofy things, like very
Like what?
punny. Like it was about a locket and, oh, I've got it all locked up, and I was using this material called pitch that you put the metal into, and it looks a little bit like pudding, and they kind of wanted me to say it's pudding, but I was like, after 9 hours of filming, I was just like, I'm not saying that.
That's so awkward because it's like not organic either, and you feel like, but this is my job, but this is my
Right,
craft.
right.
Wow, that's really cool. Right, but so being on TV, did you find like customers would like recognize you from there and call you
Well,
after that?
I just got a lot of emails from
Mm.
people um, wanting to order. So yeah, it was not like the thing that I thought is the most prestigious, but
Yeah.
it was a good exposure. I mean, of course, there's a bunch of people who emailed me and they probably were unfamiliar with the world of handmade and custom jewelry. So they're kind of
Yeah.
surprised to find out, how much a custom piece would cost. But I
Yeah.
did get some customers from that remained customers for a long time. The other thing that was really good for my business was when I started joining communities. There's a tendency to want to be uh, you know, to be friends with and like socialize with people who are in the same field as you. So I had a lot of
Mhm.
friends who were in jewelry and other handmade artisan crafts. But it was when I started joining communities where there were especially women who had a variety of different businesses that really, really helped my business because we became friends and they appreciated my work and um, started to buy from me. So
Oh,
that was a
cool.
little later when I was doing, at first I started selling to galleries, and a little bit later I was doing more direct to customer work. So when I was doing the direct to customer, I developed a fan base from being a part of these communities.
Yeah, that's really cool. And was there a sense of sort of, word of mouth um with people in your field, if someone came to one of your friends asking for something and they said, "Well, I don't do this, but I know someone who does this," and they'd point you into their direction, into your direction, kind of thing?
Sometimes,
Mm.
sometimes. But I did feel like there was also a very kind of competitive feeling in
Yeah.
jewelry.
Right.
So
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah.
yeah,
That
yeah.
must be a little bit of a difficult thing. Um, Tell me about Nepal. You lived in Nepal for how many years?
I mean, if you add it all up, it would be more than 3 years. But the
Right.
first time I went was my junior year of college for
Mm.
nearly a full year.
Yeah, and what did you do there? Because you had present when you were presenting 3D and Y, you mentioned a kind of project that you were doing there. Can you tell me a bit about it?
Well, I started doing sculpture.
Mm.
So I worked with the artisans who are based in the Kathmandu Valley, and they do cast Buddhist statuary. So it's using
Mhm.
this very, very, very old metal casting process where you make it out of wax and then a mold is made and then you cast it into it, with actually a copper alloy.
Mhm.
So I did that for a year in college and then I went back on a Fulbright a few years later. So I created a collection of sculptures. I also spent a lot of time, wandering around the Kathmandu Valley, going to various temples. Like there's beautiful work all over the place in the Kathmandu Valley,
Mhm.
um, from you know long, long time ago to things that are being made currently by people still practicing these traditional skills. Um, and then much, much later in 2015, there was an earthquake in Nepal,
Mhm.
and I started sending money for relief supplies to somebody I had met when I was a college student, and he was coordinating going around and delivering it. And then he came to me with this proposal to do rebuilding work. And we actually ended up spending 2.5 years raising the money. I was primarily fundraising here in the US, and then he was coordinating things on the ground. And there was some other, there's some other key people here in the
Yeah.
US and in Nepal, but pretty small team of people. And we ended up rebuilding this village on top of a mountain in Nepal.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And you hadn't done that kind of work before, had you? So was that something that like you felt compelled to like learn how to get into? Because I wouldn't know where to start with that.
Yeah, I kind of just jumped in,
Mm.
and I used my actually, I had to learn marketing for my jewelry business.
Mm.
So I used the things that I had learned about marketing. And even when I was first doing the raising the amount of money for relief supplies, I thought, okay, how do I create a compelling campaign? What do I need to share about this? What facts on the ground do I need to share? Like, let me listen to what people's questions are and then figure out how to address them. And so I felt, I mean, it seems kind of crazy now, but I felt really confident that I would be able to raise the money for the village. And
Yeah.
it, it definitely was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
But through that experience, like trying to communicate with my customers about the jewelry and what is the story behind the jewelry.
Yeah.
Actually telling the story of a Nepali village is easier,
Right.
than talking about it was easier for me than talking about my own jewelry and
Yeah.
the kind of meaning behind it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I can imagine because also like um it's a little bit more of like a fundamental thing people can understand. But that's so interesting that you took the marketing skills from that into the fundraising. That's so interesting. So you studied CGI modeling and animation. What made you want to change career direction? You were telling me that you had you were ready to give up your jewelry business at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, and what made you want to get into CGI and animation?
So I had uh, by the time we finished the village, we thought that the organization that we were going to grow it, and it turned out, that was difficult to do, and realized that, okay, we finished this project rebuilding this village, and now it's probably time to move on. Uh, and I had been so involved in that, and I felt like I was done with the jewelry business at that point.
Mhm.
So I kind of went on a quest to find what my next path was. And there were a lot
Mm,
of things that I considered. I actually thought about becoming a software engineer, or I thought
mm,
about, do I want to continue on with this kind of NGO world, which would require me going to graduate school? There was
mhm.
a lot of different things that I was thinking about. And it was one of my friends, um, his name is Chris, sent me a little clip of some stuff he was playing around with in Cinema 40, which made it sound really approachable and easy.
Yeah.
And that night, I could not sleep. I thought, okay, this is it. This is the thing that I want to do next. And, looking back at the both the jewelry business and the nonprofit, it was the storytelling part that I started to get really into. Like the end of my jewelry
Yeah.
business, I was creating these whole personas, and I'd spend all these hours putting together collages of imagery. And I tried making videos, which they're really, really bad, but
Yeah.
I tried. And
Yeah.
also in the nonprofit, the most effective thing I did was to go and shoot videos of the villagers and tell the story that way.
Yeah.
So this sort of storytelling component,
Hmm.
and then that meets the art and design component that's present in 3D animation. And also, I mean, jewelry making is a very detail-oriented technical skill. So people say, oh, it's so different what you're doing now with 3D. But I actually think that the mind state that you have to have and the kind of temperament that you have to have for these things is very similar. Like the attention to detail, the learning of these techniques, processes,
Yeah.
just also because they're both 3D, being able to visualize in 3D space,
Yeah.
for both of them.
Yeah.
Because if I had to make a custom ring and it had to have gemstones and it had to, sit a certain way, I would have to visualize, in my mind how this ring would come together, as I
Yeah.
was putting it on paper and designing it. So I mean, I really wish I had known computer 3D design when I was
Yeah.
making the jewelry. It would have been so much easier.
I was going to ask, like, did you sort of mock it up in 3D? No, but that's maybe what you would do now that you know how to do 3D modeling. But I can definitely see I can definitely see the similarity in the skill because you were sort of doing sculpture in real life versus sculpture in 3D,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And animation, I always think animation, I've tried my hand at it. It takes so much patience. And I suppose, do you think that the patience that you would give to your sculpting and jewelry making, you knew that you had the patience to do animation, I suppose.
Well, I didn't know how much patience it would need, but I do find myself well suited for it.
Mm.
I like to, I mean, if there's some issue, I don't rest until I get to the bottom of it. Like, why
Mm.
is this not working in the software? Okay, let me go down the list, like all of these different things that I can try to fix it.
Yeah,
Um,
tenacious. You have tenacious
yeah,
sense of detail.
yeah,
What
yeah,
did you
yeah.
find to be your most valuable resources in learning the 2D and 3D animation? Where did you learn it?
Actually, I took like a lot of people who are in the motion design field. I took classes at School of Motion.
Hmm.
So I first started for about 6 months in Cinema 4D. I was just learning the basics, and I bought a couple of classes. Like, at first I took some class on LinkedIn Learning, and that just kind of showed me because I didn't even know the entire capabilities of the software when I
Hmm.
first opened it. So that kind of showed me like just touched on all the different capabilities. And then I bought a modeling class
Hmm.
um, that goes into a lot of detail about how to model like polygonal modeling and how to get edge flow. And so I got a good basis of how I translate, you know, my familiarity with 3D real world
Hmm.
things to how it has to be in a topology. And then
Yeah.
I was like, why does my render look horrible? Oh, right. I need to learn a render engine. So I bought a
Yeah.
class on Redshift, and then I started learning about materials and how those are put together. And then I ended up seeing the advertisement for the School of Motion Cinema 4D intermediate class.
Hmm.
And I I probably could have, I mean, I definitely would have benefited from taking the beginner class, but I realized I had done quite a lot of work on my own. So I
Hmm.
jumped in, and actually, that was the first time I was introduced to the motion design community. Before that, I really didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's
then,
great. And there's such a big community, right? I feel
yeah,
like you told me.
it's a very tight-knit community. People are really helpful. It's kind of, I do a lot of projects solo, but it's also, if you're working on a bigger project, it's always a team sport. So
Yeah.
um, people are, always cultivating the relationships. You're working together, but you're also, maybe you're like collaborating on a personal project, or you just know each other through one of the Slack groups, and help each other with technical
Yeah.
issues with the software or stuff like that. So it's a very tight knit community.
That's amazing. And did you find that you were able to sort of push yourself forward creatively or technically by seeing what people in your community were doing and by asking advice and stuff? Like, did you show something work in progress video to someone and they could like help you with, I can show you how to make that better or something?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think when I was very, very new, um hesitant to ask for feedback because um
It's
it's
intimidating,
hard.
no?
Yeah, it's hard to be like new in a field when I mean, I'm not that young anymore, and here
Yeah.
I am in this new field, but
I think that's really brave. I think people like are scared to do that because they think, I'm too old to learn something new, but I think it's so cool that you didn't necessarily, I mean, maybe you had the fear, but you just got over it, right?
I mean, I kind of knew my stuff wasn't good, and I was afraid to hear somebody say it, but
Yeah.
once I started to have friends in the community, then you have a rapport with certain people, and some people are really good at giving feedback, and I have friends who are really good at camera movements and friends who are really good at materials and um just people who are really good at like giving feedback on the movement in the animation itself or the timing.
Mm.
So, now before I completely finish something, I do go and ask for feedback of how I can improve things.
Yeah.
And
So did you feel like,
it's helped me a lot. Like it's really, really important.
yeah, did you feel like you had to be of a certain, um, like you had to be good enough that you felt confident to show people? Like, did you have to reach some kind of level of skill set for yourself to be happy enough to say, okay, now I can show someone this? Or did you just have to get over your fear of it?
Well, I actually put some of my, I was like on Instagram putting some of my very basic early animations because I was really excited about it. But
Yeah.
to go specifically to somebody who was in the industry and a pro, I mean, that took more courage. Actually, the
Oh.
school motion class, how they set it up, it's you have a teaching assistant, so your teaching assistant gives you feedback.
Hmm.
So that was my first experience getting feedback on my work from the
Yeah,
teaching
that's cool.
assistant. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And what do you enjoy about being a freelancer? So tell me about the freelance world. I mean, I guess you had your own business before, so is it that different being like a freelancer in the 3D animation world?
Yeah, it is quite uh, I mean, having a service business is definitely different. When I was a jewelry maker, there's a lot of consideration of like the cost of what you're making. So like if you want to
Hmm.
make a collection, you have to understand like what your budget is for making it. And then like if you put X, Y, and Z materials in a piece and it costs so much, like how much is that final price? And
Hmm.
does the customer see that value in the final price? Um, I mean, I guess the translation for 3D animation is, how much time are you going to put in? Because there's a
Yeah.
huge difference between doing like a logo turning and, animating and like something with lots of detail and characters
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm giving like a
Yeah.
really clear
Yeah.
answer, but I
Oh
guess
yeah,
the
the
thing that
pricing, the pricing, the pricing is the interesting part, right? Like learning how to price your service.
yeah,
How
yeah.
did you learn how to do that? Did you have to get a lot of advice, or did you just sort of go, how many hours does this take me? Give myself an hourly rate, something like that?
I mean, you do kind of have to like look at the project um and see, yeah, you do have to kind of come up with an estimate of how much time it's going to take. Sometimes
Mm.
it's easier if the client has like a really specific deadline.
Mm.
So okay, I'm going to work on this for like 2 weeks
Yeah.
and then it's due.
Mm.
So there's going to be revisions, but we can't like have endless revisions. So you can just block out those 2 weeks and say, okay, here's my project rate for this project. I mean, I find clients really like to have the project rate over giving them like an hourly or
Yeah.
day rate.
Yeah.
If you're doing the entirety of the project. If you're just doing
Yeah.
like a piece of it, then they might want to go more with like a time based.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean it's still a work in progress. I have friends who are very much more experienced, so they I'll call and check with them, what do you
Yeah.
think? And also there's the client's budget. So sometimes, you can think of a way to do it that is very elaborate, all the bells and whistles, but then that doesn't fit the client budget. So then you have to think about how do you fit something that will give them the results that they want
Yeah.
into the budget that they have. Like,
Yeah.
where can you use, maybe you can use some stock assets or, um, just like simplify the animation so that it
Yeah.
fits within what they have a budget for.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot actually with architectural visualization. There's a similarity there, especially for freelancers, because of like what you want to offer your client. It's a little bit like you could have like the gold standard, the silver, like you could have like, um, option A, B, or C, and each of them are different prices. And, like if you only have the budget for C, I can do it like this. It will take me less time and it won't look as good as the gold standard, but that's okay because this is what you're paying for. And I guess that's a really interesting thing to sort of to learn. I think that's probably applicable over different kind of skill sets. And then I guess the idea that that if a client comes to you and says, how much will this cost? You've got to give a price. And then that's the thing that when you're a freelancer, you have to, maybe you're gonna underprice it at first and you have to take the hit and then you learn from that and you think next time put the price up higher because it'll take longer. Like, was that a learning curve? I imagine that
Oh
would
yeah.
do that.
Oh yeah, I did some real like
Underpricing.
low, way underpriced projects at first. And also, I mean, I also now take into consideration how developed is this client's brand?
Mm,
How accustomed are they to working with a freelancer, working with animation?
yeah.
So, um, yeah, it definitely can be tricky that way because if they're not that familiar with the animation process and like what goes into doing 3D, then it's really difficult to work through
Teach
that.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and since I'm not in the field that long, I feel like I'm still learning that,
Yeah.
how to do that education part. I mean, somebody might come to me and they want some kind of animation and I'd say, frankly, your company is pretty new and that's like spending that much money on an
Mm,
animation is probably not the
yeah.
best use of your budget right now.
That's interesting because I bet people really appreciate that too, that honesty, because then, you know, if they do further down the line and they maybe have a higher budget, they'll maybe trust that evaluation, that you're not just trying to
Right.
sell them something, even if it's not the best thing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Sometimes really simple 2D animation is
Mm.
enough to give that little bit of motion and it's
Yeah.
not going to be
T
as time as intensive.
yeah. Tell me, so you showed us your animation for Demarini. Is that the baseball bat animation? And then I also saw that you did something for Shakira promoting
Right.
her tour and stuff. Can you tell me about like one of your favorite projects
Well,
that you've
I
worked on?
I do really like both of those
Yeah.
because the DeMarini one, they had a innovation in the way they were manufacturing their bats.
Mm,
And because I come from the background as a maker,
mm,
um, I read the description and I saw, okay, they have milling in here. I know how a milling machine works. They have thermoplastic injection. So I thought and the target time was 15 seconds. So I thought, okay, how do I go through these steps where you're
mm.
seeing kind of how it's manufactured and really making it clear um, how it's manufactured. And then just like in 15 seconds to just put it in like a
Yeah.
very high energy package. So, that just started and that had a really quick deadline. So, I took the information about the manufacturing and I drew the, little milling scene. And then I'm like, how can it transition into, okay, we'll have the piece being milled and then it's just going to like fly into the mold, but I have to
Mm-hmm.
simplify it. I can't make a whole injection molding thing. That's too confusing. So I really love the way that I could just look at the written words and turn it into like about 5 different images. It
Yeah.
would definitely explain what the process was.
Yeah. So did you have to storyboard it and send that to the client to like I imagine it sounds like you storyboarded it at least in your head with the
Oh,
different
I did a
stages, right?
sketch. I did a sketch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So interesting. And so for anyone who hasn't seen it, like I'll try and link to it if it's online.
it is. Yeah.
Um, but you have this like baseball bat with like the wood, and then you have the different things wrapping around it, and it's sort of like very dynamically turning into a baseball bat essentially. And like I thought that was fascinating because I have no idea how that's made. And it's very
Yeah.
easy for someone who doesn't know to understand it.
Right.
That's
Um,
cool. So that was a cool project.
yeah. And then, of course, the Shakira project was amazing because um,
What
she
did you
performed
what Yeah, can you tell me about that project?
she performed a pop-up concert in Times Square, and it was this LED screen that's 9 stories tall,
Mm,
and it has a stage that opens up. So it
mm,
was announced earlier in the day. She was, hinting about it for a couple days, and then it was announced in the afternoon that there would be a concert that night. And because there's this 9 story screen, there was some animated content that was kind of around the camera view of her.
hmm
So there were cameras that were being fed into the screen, so people from far away could see the performance on the screen
hmm
itself, and then the animated content was around that. So that was a whole team effort. So
mm.
it was a lot of fun working on the team and the creative director. Like it was really great working with her to work on this and all the different teams involved in it. But because I live in New York, a lot of the people on the team don't live in New York, but because I live in New York, I just went downtown and saw the concert. So, 40,000 people cheering while your is on the screen.
Yeah, that must have been amazing. Was it like
That's
on repeat? Was like the stuff you'd animated was sort of repeating, or did you have to do a long, like hour long or set
well,
long
it
animation?
was a 15-minute concert. So each song
Oh, okay.
had a different theme, and my animations were with a couple of the songs at specific points in the song.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
must have been so cool.
it was really
To see
cool.
your
Yeah,
work in Times Square. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So I have another question for you. So you've taught yourself quite a few different skills like in the past few years. What skills would you like to learn next that you haven't learned yet?
Well, I'm actually in the process of learning Houdini,
So
and
Houdini is like for animating, is it mostly particle animation?
um, you can really animate a lot of things in Houdini, but
Mm,
it's kind of the gold standard for anything to do with fire, water, particles.
Yeah.
It's also really great for anything organic. Like
Mm-hmm.
I went through a class where I made a flower rig, and you can get that really nice, like organic feel to the
Oh,
flower petals and stuff.
yeah. Mm.
So, Houdini it takes quite a while to learn. So I'm expecting to be, I mean, you never really learn these things 100%, and they're always
Yeah.
changing and they're always adding new things. But I'm expect to be a student of Houdini intensely for quite a while before I can say like, okay, I'm a Houdini artist. But um, yeah, I really want to make more things in that. I really like fluid simulations.
Yeah.
And I also really want to make more things that are natural, growing, organic. Um, and Houdini is well suited for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to see what you make because I think, like, I found your animations, the stuff that you've posted, like on LinkedIn and Instagram and stuff, like it's very compelling visually. Like you had an ice cream in the summer, and it's probably I don't know if that's very simple, but it doesn't look simple. It looks like wow, you've made that look delicious. And then you had a Cadbury chocolate one I saw recently
Yeah,
where you were
yeah.
showing, and I mean, food animation seems like a hard thing. I always think food CGI must be difficult because you actually have to make it, someone's looking at it and you have to make it look delicious. And I feel like sometimes if food doesn't look real, you can't imagine the taste. But if you make it look, there's some kind of something to the movement as well as the textures. But even if it's not real, I don't know how
Yes.
to
So
explain that.
that are like my two projects that I did without a tutorial in Houdini so far.
Mm, okay.
So I'm glad that
Yeah.
that they look so delicious. So yeah, the thing with the food is when you do liquid simulations, you have to work with the viscosity and surface tension.
Mm,
And then of course, like making the material, the chocolate is easy because it's just kind of a shiny, chocolate covered material. But
mm.
ice cream, I had to add like a little bit of to make it a little bit of subsurface scattering to make it like look
Yes.
like it's
So
not.
liquidy on the outside, like it's melting, but it's also
Yeah,
like a thicker. Wow,
yeah.
you could like really delve into the. And Houdini, I've like opened it up a couple of times in my life. It's intimidating in terms of what it can do, but that also probably means that you can do a lot with it, I suppose. So that's
Oh
an
yeah,
exciting one to learn, right?
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, the ice cream, to get it to like swirl, it's a soft for people who are listening. It's a soft serve cone. So like getting it to be like that exact soft serve.
Mm,
And then when it's like it settles and it just like settles oh so
mm. Yeah.
slightly. I really wanted to have a little drip come off, but I'm like, okay, let's like let it rest. This is a little more advanced. So let me just
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to say, okay, let me just finish this project and move on with my life because you could
Yeah.
get really obsessive about, okay, I could add this little thing and add that little thing. And then it just adds like a week onto getting the project done.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a really good thing to keep in mind as well about finishing projects. Like I think that's a whole thing, isn't it? Knowing when to stop and start something new or just like to finish this, even though it's not perfect. And you can always come back to it, but you need to sort of move on. So I have something to close up on. What advice would you give someone who wants to become a freelancer in animation?
Uh, I would say that if you don't do personal projects, you should make personal projects so that you can start building out a reel. I mean, some people have a really solid reel from doing some kind of in-house position or working in an agency. But then again, a lot of times you can't show those in your reel.
Mm,
So I would say having uh, personal projects that you can make a strong reel, getting feedback on the reel, uh, getting to know people in the community,
hmm
those are all really important things. Also, I'm still kind of working on this, but if you have some kind of particular area that you are more experienced in, or you have more draw to do, like maybe you want to make product renders like headphones,
Mm.
or computers, or some people are into cars, like if you have that kind of specialized interest or experience, like to focus on that, because it's a lot easier for someone to refer you
Mm.
if they know, oh, okay, I met this freelancer and I see that they do like this specialized thing. Like there's some people, like there's one guy that in like the motion design 3D motion design community, like if anybody has a character animation,
Mm.
like a sort of a stylized character animation, they always tag him for the jobs. So,
Oh, interesting.
that's a really good position to be in, um, to kind of develop this identity where people always know how to refer you. That being said, I end up doing other things outside of something that I'm very specialized in. So,
Hmm.
um, you should also know how to composite your work
Hmm.
and finish it so that it looks polished, because sometimes you're just working on your own, so you have to be able to deliver it from start to finish.
Yeah, yeah, and learning all the different tools and the different processes. So like the modeling, the animation, the rendering, like the lighting and rendering, and then the compositing and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, final editing. That's really, and like I love the idea of the community of people um knowing your speciality and referring you, because that's really what I think that's probably one of the strongest points of the community, right? Is like is I mean, I've heard of artist collectives starting. I have different friends who have started artist collectives, which are very similar to this idea, where it's a bunch of freelancers essentially. They're but they sort of referring each other when they have clients or they find clients who have jobs, and I can't take this on right now, but I know someone who's really good and I can refer you to them. And passing around the business seems to be such a nice thing.
yeah,
Because you're helping each other and you're also helping the client who is just looking for someone they can trust. It's like, well, you can trust this person. um that's must be really valuable to a business.
yeah. I don't really get jobs just from like randomly emailing people,
Mm,
or people randomly emailing me. It's my name is usually passed on, and then
mm,
people that I've worked with, when they're looking for something besides what that's a different specialty than what I do, they've also asked me, who do I know in
mm,
the community, so then I'm able to pass on another name. Or sometimes I see something on LinkedIn and someone's looking for something specific, and I know that somebody,
mm.
so I'll take them and I'll write a recommendation.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of get into this relationship with the community where you're you're helping to connect people with opportunities if you can, and then also it naturally comes back around to you.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I feel like that's also great advice to end it on. Being part of a community is really valuable. And yeah, it sounds amazing. I can't wait to see what new stuff that you produce, and I'm gonna put links to anything that you've made in the video here so people can find you. Thank you so much, Natasha, for joining. I thought it's like a really valuable insight into your journey getting into 3D animation and what you've brought from sculpture and jewelry making and all the business stuff that you've learned. I think it's fascinating. And I love your energy for learning new stuff too. I
Oh,
think
thank you.
that's not always easy to keep as you progress in your career, whatever that is. I feel like to remember that you can learn new stuff, and that's what keeps it exciting, is a cool thing to remember.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. It's a great conversation.
Thank you. I've enjoyed talking to you too.